Hey guys, and welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. This is episode 23 of the 2025 season, and in this episode today we are going to be reviewing the events of an thoroughly entertaining Canadian Grand Prix, which saw strategy play a part and saw a collision between two title protagonists, which has been something this podcast has been asking for a while now. I'm your host for this one, Anwar, and in this episode I am joined by three guests. I'm joined once again by Daniel and Lucy, returning guests, and another returning guest in James. Thank you guys all for coming on. My first question to all of you, I guess, I'll start with James here. What would we rate this weekend out of 10? I guess, was this something that we expected out of Canada in terms of, was this entertaining? Or was this more entertaining than usual compared to a regular Canadian? What was your perspective of things?
Well, maybe a 7. I mean, I quite enjoyed the race, but it kind of felt like it was going to develop into something really exciting, which never quite happened. I mean, it was a decent race. Felt like it was so close. I mean, like 10 laps to go, and we had like the top 5 covered by 6 seconds. It's really great having such close racing, but at the same time, it never properly developed into that exciting race. I thought we get trying different strategies and build up to an exciting finish, and it never quite happened. I mean, Verstappen pressured Russell at first, but then seemed to drop off towards the end of each stint with the tyre wear, wasn't really able to do anything. And it never, even though it was close, it never quite developed into that true battle. And there wasn't action until then, of course, the McLarens came together late on, which I don't know, it was a late drama.
I do think that McLaren collision did kind of put nip the bud in the sense of that could have boiled down to a really entertaining finish. And although that is an incredibly entertaining thing to happen, it kind of meant that we didn't see the culmination that we were kind of building up for, right?
I'm not sure. I think Russell and Verstappen had first and second in the bag at that point. Yeah, maybe one of the McLarens could have challenged Kimi for the podium, but
yeah, I mean, fair points. Lucy, what did you feel? What would you rate this weekend out of 10?
Well, I mean, kind of along the same lines, I'd say 7. 7 probably. Could also maybe go more, a little lower or a little higher again. It's kind of debatable. I liked it. I had a good time watching it. I do like races that favour strategy a little bit more, and while it was fun to watch the teams because it was very soft tyres but also different to last year, the teams were all kind of getting their heads around it. We saw a lot of people in quali on the mediums, which was weird until you remember that those were the softs last year. So it may have actually been that they just held up their tyre wear better around the lap. To be honest, I'm wondering whether the McLaren's colliding, and even before they actually collided, them actually fighting for a bit and us finally watching the title contenders have a battle on track has slightly coloured it and made me remember it as being more interesting than it actually was. But either way, I had a good time. I think 7-ish is a pretty good shout.
Daniel, do you agree with the kind of sentiment that this is probably a 7 out of 10 as a race, or would you say this is a little bit better or worse?
No, I'd say the weekend as a whole deserves a 7 because qualifying was exciting, unpredictable, with an unexpected result. The race itself was probably about a 6, to be fair. I mean, thank goodness for Pirelli shifting the tyre compounds one step softer. It gave us quite a lot of variation in strategy, which was enjoyable. But on the whole, there wasn't that much excitement, especially in the mid part of the race. The midfield was just one huge DRS train. There were quite a few good scraps, I guess. But on the whole, they were just kind of tucking in and doing their own strategy. We've had 4 different race winners from the last 4 races now, which is very exciting. We're getting into 2024 levels of variety soon. And it kind of reminded me of Monza 2021, where we got an unexpected first time this season winner after the championship rivals collide on track. but that unexpected winner would have won anyway, regardless of the collision. So it was kind of parallels and like that. I would have loved 1 or 2 more laps of racing to decide between Verstappen and Russell on who wins the race, but unfortunately, Lando Norris decided to spread himself down the wall a couple laps too late for a safety car restart, unfortunately.
It did feel we were a couple laps short. I did get the same feeling as well, because it was ultimately all building up to a nice little finish, right? And then obviously Norris does what he does and bottles it. We'll talk about that more in a few moments' time. But I was going to say on the tyre-related front, I'm really happy that we're seeing a lot more strategically interesting racing. I think we give Pirelli a lot of slack for boring one-stop strategies, but we've seen quite a few two-stops recently, and I think that's for the best, right? I don't know if I guess people are going to agree with that, right? If I ask Lucy, do you feel that's better for entertainment purposes, or would you rather the one-stops that we have been so accustomed to seeing?
No, God, no. No, don't give me one-stops, please. No. I love that we're getting new strategies, and I really think that these, because it has mainly been with the new tires that they're bringing in, the addition of the C6, and even how that means that then Pirelli can kind of mess around a bit more with which kind of compounds they bring to other races. But no, I think they've really hit this sweet spot, I think, with it, because it's sort of the perfect tire sort of window that actually allows you to mess around a bit with your strategy within it. Like, it's not the case where they've added a new set of softer tires, but all it's done is meant that everyone now does a two-stop. Like, I love the fact that we're getting so many races that sit in kind of the in-between zone between, you can go for a one-stop and it'll be tricky, or you can go for a two-stop, but you're going to have to probably overtake people who are sort of trying to send it on a one-stop. I like it. I'm a big fan.
I guess that's the type of variability that we kind of want to see, you know. I do think that the one-stop strategy clearly wasn't the way to go around here. I think that was slowly becoming more obvious as the race proceeded. But the fact that we're even having those discussions are a positive thing for sure.
Sorry, just to interrupt. The one-stop strategy wasn't the way to go, but I think it was. I think it was Sainz and Ocon both committed to a one-stop strategy, just going, or they may have ended up pitting behind the safety car, but they went really long, on their stints, and that benefited them massively, because they ended up scoring points when realistically they probably shouldn't have been there. But Leclerc and Norris staying out really, really long the first stint to try and get a safety car. It's even just the fact that there's even when the one stop's not a compelling choice, the fact that there's the possibility of, with a late safety car, just there is now the option to just stick on those tires for ages and just hope and pray is cool.
I think it definitely depends how you execute the one stop. I mean, Hulkenberg pulled off a one stop strategy and he ended up with good points when he started quite lower down than where he finished. You've got, like you mentioned, Lucy, the Ocon and the Sainz one stop. They took their hard tyres from the start all the way to lap 57, then boxed for mediums, which was quite a lengthy stint, and that paid off for them. But then on the flip side, you have one stops like Bortoletto and Gasly, who just they pitted a bit too early to really maximize the longevity of their first stint, which meant they kind of lost out to some of the other cars who had offset. So it really does depend on the other cars around you. Overcut, under. It is very difficult to keep up with a two-stop race. That's one of the only downsides of increasing the number of stops in a race. It's hard to track who's where. But you have increased strategy intrigue for people who like that. But also, like I mentioned, with those offsets, you get more wheel-to-wheel racing because there's high degradation, there's a bigger delta between the cars, so they're more likely to overtake each other. So I think it's a win-win for many kinds of Formula One fans who enjoy loads of different types of action, I think.
I quite like it as well, these two stops. I mean, it makes it more action than in a one stop. In some ways, it is a bit artificial bringing the soft compounds to create a race. But on the other hand, it is increasingly difficult to overtake this year. Pirelli's compounds do seem a bit harder this year generally. Remember, we have had a one-stop races like places like Japan and Saudi Arabia. There's been little degradation at all, so we could kind of need it to make up for that. Need it to make the compounds a bit softer just to counter that. I mean, the strategy has still been a bit restricted in the front in terms of the options. I think part of the problem is actually the pack is just too close. Actually, issue is in the past. I mean, you want to try and get past someone. If Verstappen is quicker than Russell and wants to try and get past for the lead, he might run a few laps longer so he can try and pass on fresher tyres. But the problem is the pack is so close together that if you try that, you'll be undercut by someone behind like Antonelli or Piastri because the pack is just too close. It doesn't give you much manoeuvrability, and we saw that in Japan as well. It's just so close together, the pack, and it actually makes it harder to race, which is strange. And it packs
I think that's just the very nature of... Is that not the very nature of having like the last year regulations as well? But,
yeah, it is. Yeah, that's what you get with a close field. In terms of the one stop and the two stop, I mean, the one stop did work for some people. I mean, Hulkenberg P8, Ocon P9, Sainz P10, it worked for them. I mean, Ocon didn't make his first. Ocon and Sainz didn't make their first stop until lap 57, which was 20 laps after Verstappen and Antonelli had made their second. So it did work for some people. I know some people didn't get the best strategy. People like Hajar was put on a not great strategy, pitted very early and then ran to the end, and it didn't stuck by Colin Pinto all race, and it did not work.
Yeah, but, I mean, what you're saying is absolutely right. It did work for some people, but no one really. Even though a few of the front runners may have looked at that as an opportunity, I don't think any of the front runners were able to do it just because of the pace difference, I guess, that these people were running at. And also we saw the midfield was so congested. Even when we were looking at lap cars, it was kind of, they were all congregated around one part of the circuit, and it wasn't exactly amazing for, I remember it not working out well for Oscar Piastri in terms of navigating through that. But before we go into all the main details and all the main talking points, let's go through the race rundown. Daniel, can you take us away with that?
Sure. So, George Russell won the Canadian Grand Prix. I mean, forget Mercedes' temperature preferences. It was just an ice-cold victory from George Russell, who dominated both competitive sessions in the weekend, and he led home Max Verstappen, who finished in second place. I guess the best way to not get penalty points is just to avoid every other car on track, wave Antonelli through when he gets close, and then continually undercut him to finish ahead of him, because Antonelli finished third, his third place finish, and the third youngest podium finisher in history as well, which is good for him, just behind Lance Stroll and Max Verstappen. Fourth place was Oscar Piastri. What's that quote? It's never interrupt your enemy whilst he's making a mistake. I think his enemy made a mistake on Sunday, and Oscar Piastri definitely benefited from it. I guess why fight your championship rival when you can let him crash himself into the wall? Charles Leclerc was fifth. Was it plan B or was it plan C for him? I think it was just plan go long on the stints and wait for a safety car or a red flag, which didn't work out for him. Lewis Hamilton in sixth. He picked up some damage from a groundhog, unfortunately. It seems a bit like Groundhog Day from Spain when he also had damage on his car early on, and he couldn't maximise the potential of that Ferrari. Fernando Alonso, some more points. His best finish of the season in seventh, and I guess his bad luck earlier in the season can be explained by his lack of facial hair. Brilliant Dallas moustache he was sporting this weekend, looking stunningly similar to Nigel Mansell. Maybe the facial hair is lap time. Nico Hulkenberg, eighth place. Once again, a mid-quali for Sauber, but a great race. They're starting to make a name for themselves in the points. Esteban Ocon spawned into ninth place after pulling off a one-stop strategy. The only thing that seems consistent about Haas is their inconsistent pace, to be honest. It seems like 10th place was Carlos Sainz, who had an identical strategy to Ocon, as we've mentioned, and followed him home to score 1 point after managing a PU issue as well. Ollie Behrman had a bit of a scrappy weekend, but managed to finish in 11th, which isn't too bad. He ran quite wide in the race. I was sure he was going to finish close to last position, but Haas, again, must have used cheat codes or something to put him up to 11th. Yuki Tsunoda in 12th after his 10th-place grid penalty for overtaking Oscar Piastri in practice. That seems quite harsh, given that Oscar Piastri had 3 wheels on his car, but it's the precedent, so Tsunoda had to do a recovery drive. 13th was Colapinto, who, to be honest, got very little airtime during the race. But he did get some when he gave Albon a very different kind of airtime by ushering him quite wide off the track and over some very bumpy grass, leading to a questionable rejoin from him. Bortoleto 14th. I think he's going to need some points soon. 20-0 doesn't look so good to Hulkenberg, but the strategy wasn't great, as we've mentioned as well. Pierre Gasly in 15th. He was a bit caught out by the red flag in Q1, which meant he qualified P20 and had a painful race, really just kind of stuck, not able to push too much, finished behind his teammate. Isaac Hadjar, he was 16th. His first non-points finish in a while. I guess he decided to put in a little quiet stinker of a race, just a hush talk of a Red Bull promotion, which is clever if you ask me. Lance Stroll was the last of the finishers in 17th. He came back to F1 after an injury in his right wrist ruled him out in Spain. He could have finished higher if he used that wrist a bit more to turn right at the last chicane and not squeeze Gasly so much to get that penalty for forcing him off. And then we come to the DNFs, the last of which, but the 18th place was Lando Norris. And the gap that he was going for on Piastri was probably inversely proportional to the gap at the head of the driver's standings. One gap was closed and the other grows to 22 points now, which is a shame. Then Liam Lawson, he had to retire from the race thanks to cooling issues, I believe. If you believe the weather forecasts, we might have some cooling issues of our own in the UK, so look forward to that. Alex Albon was the first retiree. His engine cover flew off his car in qualifying, a bit like champagne flies on the podium, but his power unit died in the race. It went flat. Just like champagne again after it's left out for a bit too long. So Alex Albon doing a bit of Moet and Chandon champagning this weekend. But that was the rundown of the Canadian Grand Prix.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. That was thoroughly entertaining. Cool. I think we should start with the story at the front end of the grid, which is the Mercedes, who we almost kind of suspected would have some degree of pace in qualifying. We had a few of us predict the Russell would be on pole, but I guess none of us really expected that to show up in the race, did we? I'll start with Lucy here. How surprised were we that this pace from the Mercedes was also present in race conditions as well?
I didn't see it coming, mainly because it feels kind of like throughout this year, Merc have been sort of in the discussion in qualifying, but then once it actually gets to the race, they just become anonymous compared to the McLarens and Verstappen. But really, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised. It was kind of a little bit cooler in Canada than it has been in some previous races, which we know Mercedes like. I mean, they've even like last year they did best in like some of the wet races and in Las Vegas where it's just freezing. And this year they did well in Australia where it was also a wet race and therefore also cold. So I guess I shouldn't have been surprised that they had pace, but I was just I nevertheless was. I didn't see it coming, but kind of it never looked in doubt. Like once there was never a case where I thought, oh, Merc are like 3 seconds from having their pace drop off a cliff. To be honest, surprised their power units made it the whole way through. That was a very consistent theme of theirs in the triple header, that their power units did not survive. But shockingly, they did. And yeah.
is this type of result really promising for Mercedes? Because we've been kind of theorizing how they struggle in the higher temperature conditions, and it wasn't exactly a cold shower on Sunday, on the race on Sunday. It was still pretty hot, yet they still maintain a good level of competitiveness where Russell was able to eke out gaps if and when he needed to, when Verstappen applied some pressure. James, does this bode well for Mercedes, do you think?
I think it does, yes. I mean, we know they're good in colder conditions. It was quite cold for quali. It was a few degrees, not freezing, it was a few degrees warmer for the race, but it does bode well for Mercedes. Yes, I mean, we have the suspension upgrade coming back this weekend, which they tried in Imola, didn't have it set up right, didn't go very well, and they're taking it off for the next two races, but it was back. I mean, we know it's a track they go well at. They always have gone well in Canada for a long time, but even the last few years, they've gone, even in the ground effect here. I mean, Russell got pole last year and could well have won in a dry race last year, but we ultimately won't know. But yes, so generally, it's a track where Mercedes go well at. They seem to go well at street circuits. I mean, they go well at Vegas as well. But it is definitely promising. Antonelli up there as well, a very good race pace. It seems similar to Russell, if not slightly quicker. He seemed right at the front, which was good. I mean, both cars on the podium. And after a terrible triple header where they're outscored by Racing Bulls, it's a great bounce back from Mercedes and hopefully something they can build on, particularly with some tracks with cooler weather coming up. Let's not forget they won 3 out of 4 races last year, going up to the summer break, and they're up to those 4 races again this year. Coming up next, Austria Silverstone's next 3 races at Austria, Silverstone and Spa, and they won all 3 of those last year. So that's
absolutely does bode well, right? Daniel, do you have confidence in Mercedes to actually build on this though? Because I feel like we've had a few false dawns before with certain teams winning a race and then hoping that they build onto it, and they don't really build on the momentum. Do we have confidence in Mercedes to do that here?
No, I don't. I mean, you mentioned a false dawn. We've seen it before from Mercedes themselves on many occasions over the past 3 years specifically. We've asked the question, are Mercedes back, so many times that it's become worn and no one's saying it anymore because it's become very memed. So I don't think that they're going to be consistently challenging at the front anymore, no matter the temperature. I think they'll go well probably in Silverstone again, especially if we have typical British overcloud and maybe some drizzle during the race. Could definitely play into their hands, because I still do think that the temperature is a factor for Mercedes. I don't think it's as important as it was. There was a rear suspension upgrade that was introduced in Imola, which there's kind of talk that they were able to maybe get on top of their problems slightly in that sense. But they've also just gone well in Canada over the past few years. So in terms of looking ahead for Austria, I mean, yes, George Russell won last year. That was incredibly lucky. It required one rather controversial incident ahead of him and 2 cars falling back for that to happen. But I wouldn't rule out, like I said, maybe a comeback in Silverstone or even Spa or somewhere like that, where it can be maybe not very summery, let's say.
We've got kind of 2 ends of the spectrum in terms of hope and confidence in Mercedes here. Lucy, where do you stand in terms of this kind of scale of Mercedes' confidence and faith?
Mercedes aren't going to become the new McLaren. It's not like Canada's going to be their massive turning point and they're now going to be winning everything, fighting for podiums all the time. But I do think it's worth noting that Mercedes have had quite a few podiums this year. They hadn't had a win, and their podiums were kind of, there was the whole meme of sort of George Russell just does nothing all race and then ends up P3. But Mercedes, this is by no means like a 2020 Ferrari situation where they've had an just absolutely horrific season. I think we're going into some races where they performed a little better last year, and even sort of the years before a bit. But so I'd expect them to maybe be able to carry some of the momentum forward. Having a win will help with that. But if they kind of win a lot of the next few races, we probably shouldn't see it as a sign that they're the new de facto dominant team, and more we're entering the phase of the season where we expected them to be more competitive anyway.
Yeah, all fair points. Let's look at the actual drivers themselves. Russell was able to navigate all the pressure from Verstappen. Verstappen did try and come close at times, but Russell was able to push forward. And Antonelli, I was very impressed by, actually, because there was points in his stints where he seemed to be dropping back towards the clutches of Oscar Piastri and the pack behind, but was able to put pressure back onto Verstappen at the end of his stints pretty consistently. Does that show you guys in terms of development in regards to his tyre wear and tyre management that he was able to do that against Verstappen?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Max is no slouch, obviously. The Red Bull has been very competitive this year, in the hands of Max at least. And, I'd say it was a great overtake from Antonelli to get past Max. Max didn't make it too hard at all. I guess he knew what he was doing with the strategy and he could just get past him again. But from Antonelli and Russell's side, it was a great performance. I mean, Antonelli's move on Piastri alone in the first few corners, turns 1, 2, and 3, around the outside, then to get the inside, and it was just almost perfection from Antonelli. And it's so promising, so early in his career. You could ask the question, like, what's better, his Miami sprint pole or this podium? Ooh, I'd say this podium because it's harder to manage, obviously, the tyres during a race than it is to just go full attack in a qualifying lap. That's where raw pace comes out. But to actually think and manage from inside the cockpit is much harder. But also from Russell as well. I mean, we've seen in the past, George Russell has had a fair few mistakes, especially in Canada. Last year, he ran wide and let, I think it was Norris through for second place when he was in the process of chasing down Verstappen for the win. That cost him on that day. 2023, he crashed into the wall. It was pretty much an unforced error, but the mistake reduction this year was 100%. There was nothing wrong at all with what he did. The car was there and he executed. He's the man to do it. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a contract extension for George Russell in maybe even the next few days.
James, do you agree with everything Daniel said in terms of the performances of the Mercedes drivers this weekend?
Yeah, I think Antonelli had a really good weekend. I mean, it was a good move on Piastri on the first lap, and then he had some pretty good pace. I mean, it seemed pretty similar to Russell and Verstappen. I mean, particularly towards the end of the stint, Verstappen seemed to have worse tyre wear than Mercedes, and both. Although Verstappen was kind of able to pressure Russell at the start of the stints, particularly in the first stint at the start, he dropped back towards the end of the stint, and looked like Antonelli was in DRS range of Verstappen both times when Verstappen dived off into the pits, which shows how good Antonelli's pace was. And he kept pace with Russell, like a few seconds, like 4 seconds behind or something, if all the safety car came out. It's a really impressive race for Antonelli. Yeah, good tyre management. He's clearly a huge talent. And a great way to bounce back after the triple header, which had really not gone well, with a best finish of 18th in the triple header. Be it partly due to unreliability, this was a great way to bounce back and just what he needed, a first podium in Formula One in just his 10th race. And for George Russell, it was a pretty excellent performance. Nailed qualifying, took pole, and pole is very important this season. Didn't really put a foot wrong in the race. Yes, Mercedes car being strong here, but it was a pretty good performance from both drivers.
I think that shows, Lucy, right, the fact that having two quality drivers who are able to perform at the highest level consistently and be competitive is so important in modern day Formula One. And I think, would you say that is something that Ferrari and Red Bull currently lack?
Yeah, I mean, I think if Mercedes do actually have some sort of pace, and if their reliability issues get better, for the rest of the year, considering that there is a proper little scrap for second place in the Constructors' Championship, you know, Mercedes are currently back in second after that very good weekend last time. But going up against Ferrari, who knows what they're doing, and Red Bull, who are effectively only got one driver, Mercedes are at a massive advantage now that it just in terms of their lineup. And so, yeah, it'll be a massive help to them. And even especially if they do, which I think they should, if they do renew Russell's contract, knowing that they've got a very solid lineup going forward if they can keep being competitive with their car.
Yeah, I think they've got a very future-proof lineup if they keep it that way. We'll see whether any dealings in the transfer market play out that prevent that from happening. I think it's time we get to the thing that is probably the most important occurrence over the course of this weekend, and that is the incident, let's say, between the two McLarens. So if you missed the race, this was where Norris and Piastri were locked into a battle that was thoroughly entertaining. Going into turn one, Norris had the slipstream after doing a little bit of a switchback maneuver through the chicane in the last two corners. Had a run on Piastri, then proceeds to go for a gap that never really existed and went straight into the back of his teammate, leaving him out of the race and retiring, and leaving Piastri to extend his championship advantage to 22 points. Firstly, and I've seen quite a few people online who, which is never a good sign in truth, say that they shouldn't have ever been allowed to battle. It's not right for teammates to do that. There should have been team orders. Does everyone agree here that we should be allowing them to let them race at this stage of the season?
God, yes, they're in a championship fight, and McLaren have enough of a buffer in the Constructors' Championship that the team that Norris and Piastri can fight, and therefore maybe occasionally DNF a bit, and it's not going to risk McLaren's championship hopes. Yeah, they should definitely be allowed to fight.
Daniel and James, do you guys agree with this, or are you along the side of, I guess, some of the hardcore McLaren fans who didn't want to see their team drop points?
Well, I think the key word that you said there was online, which probably means those people are wrong, because I hadn't even really considered that they shouldn't fight, to be honest. Of course they should. I guess you could. The only argument against it would be, maybe Piastri could get Antonelli and they could get on the podium. McLaren aren't there to get podiums; they want wins, And I think if you're thinking about, we could get a podium with one driver, or we could let both drivers be happy by allowing them to race and not compromising the happy little families and harmony that we've got going on within our papaya team. I think they rightfully chose allowing the drivers to race and showing that they put their trust in their drivers to keep it clean. Maybe they did think Piastri wouldn't have enough pace to get Antonelli. And I can imagine Andrea Stella, because he's used this kind of logic before, he probably would have thought, well, if Oscar can't get Kimi, then maybe Lando should be allowed to have a go. But you could say on the opposite side of that, if Lando couldn't get Oscar, then he wouldn't have been able to get Kimi. So there are many factors at play. No, I think it was fine what they did. Obviously, the outcome wasn't fine. And in retrospect, you can say, maybe they should have just waved Norris through to go and get Antonelli because he clearly had better pace. Or they should have held station and waited for Piastri to get Antonelli because he had decent pace as well. But the fact of the matter is, that's not how it happened. McLaren are doing the right thing. They should just continue to let them battle. But also, from a selfish fan perspective, that's what I wanted as well. We hadn't had a McLaren battle all year, and I'm very glad that we got one in the end. So, no, they didn't do anything wrong.
James, are you also in agreement with Daniel and Lucy here in terms of we should allow them to let them fight, particularly considering the gap they have in the constructors is pretty substantial?
I mean, well, they've got the Constructors' Championship in the bag. I mean, no one else is going to take that off them. It would take quite some performance for a team with both drivers. I mean, the Drivers' Championship is not a guarantee. Verstappen is not out of contention yet. He's still only 43 points behind and he is Verstappen in a Red Bull, which is just about up there at the moment. So we wouldn't count them out. In terms of battling each other, I mean, on one hand, obviously, there's a risk of a collision, but on the other hand, yeah, it's going to anger your driver. You don't let them race, will anger the fans as well. And McLaren, we've seen them be very conservative in letting their drivers race and scared to even put them on different strategies so they don't encounter with each other, often to the team's own detriment. I mean, we saw in Japan, for example, they weren't willing to split the strategies. They put both drivers on the same strategy and they both got beaten by Verstappen. And McLaren maybe lost out because of that. They've been very conservative and often tried to prioritise into team harmony. I mean, so avoiding a repeat of Hungary last year with any team orders tension. McLaren have been very conservative about their drivers crashing into each other for a long time. They've been very clear they do not want their drivers to crash each other. I remember Andreas Seidel saying when Sainz and Norris were teammates that he viewed it as a personal insult if they crashed into each other. Not that Sainz and Norris were really going to crash into each other. And even when Norris and Piastri banged the wheels coming out the pits in Monza a couple of years ago, we need to investigate that. There should never be contact between the two McLaren cars. So they clearly do not want their drivers crashing into each other. But at the same time, you've got two drivers. But they did recognise it already said before the race it's inevitable with two drivers going for the championship. They come together at some point. Ultimately, and please they do let them race because it's much better for the championship and it would cause tension otherwise. And then you always get into these scenarios where they're on different strategies for whatever reason, and then one's quicker than the other, and you use team orders. If you don't allow them to race and you don't use team orders, it's going to wreck one driver's strategy. So, yeah, it can mess, but yeah.
Yeah, I from my perspective, I thought it was like Daniel said, the key operative word there being online. I found that stuff ridiculous in truth. If anyone thinks that McLaren are under threat in the Constructors' Championship, they need to give their head a wobble because they've got that under lock and key. And with that in mind, I think when you've got two high-level drivers who, understandably, you can make the argument that Piastri has been comfortably the better driver than Norris compared to in this year. They're still both high-level drivers, right? You should be able to see these two compete at the highest level, and so allowing them to race is something that I really hope they continue to do, because until they crashed, it was a thoroughly entertaining battle between the two drivers for sure. Now let's look at the actual incident itself. What do you guys think this was a product of? Was this Norris being too desperate to try and make a point? Do you think, Lucy?
To be honest, I think it was just kind of a perfect storm. Piastri was kind of trying to chase down Antonelli. They were all very close. Everyone was all very close together. They were all trying also to unlap back markers. I definitely think that the back markers completely kind of screwed Piastri over, because there was some interesting back marker overtaking involved. But I think it was Norris trying to go for an overtake with the collision specifically. They had been battling for about a lap, I want to say, before then. Or at least, for a few corners. That wasn't the first attempt that Norris tried to make a pass on Piastri. I think it was Norris probably wanted to get the move for the championship, but also just because it's a race, and went for it, and the move was not in fact there. He might have thought that he could try and go on to get Antonelli and maybe even Verstappen if he cleared Piastri quickly. But I don't think it was sort of him trying to make a point to the team about saying you need to kind of, if like in the championship, you need to sort of be prioritizing me or anything like that. I think it was just wanting to go for an overtake, and the overtake was not in fact on.
Yeah, Daniel, what would you say was like the key ingredient for this collision? What would you put this down to?
Maybe it was Norris putting too much trust in his teammate to the point of omniscience, because Piastri, if you look at the replays, at the point where Norris was on the left and about to head into the wall, Piastri's looking in his right mirror, which is exactly where he expects Norris to be, because it's quite obvious that there is no room on the left, and certainly not a car's width. So the fact that Norris went there was irrational, to say the least. In terms of the causal factors, it might have just been a bit of desperation, because that was certainly set up by, firstly, Norris's amazing move down into the hairpin, which kind of lunged on Piastri and then made them side by side going down the straight, both with DRS. And it forced Piastri to brake heavily on the inside going into the last chicane. Norris squared off the corner more and allowed him to get a good run heading down into the first corner. So it was set up by several corners before, which is brilliant racecraft from Norris to have that kind of vision, but then obviously threw it away. So there's an aspect of Norris thinking, I might not have this opportunity again, because Piastri will be expecting me to try that into the hairpin on the next lap. So he's going to be defending it and I won't be able to come out side by side. So the answer, I think, is if Norris had taken Piastri out the hairpin earlier, when Piastri did not have DRS on Antonelli, Norris would have been able to make the move stick, because he would have been ahead of Piastri coming out of the hairpin, and he would have had DRS while Piastri, crucially, did not. So it would have been a drag race. Norris would have won. He would have kept the position. As it was, Piastri had enough speed to fight back with the DRS, and that resulted in them side by side, and ultimately Norris making the misjudgment. So it was sloppy. I mean, it was pretty classy from Norris to immediately admit defeat, even with all the adrenaline. We've seen drivers before blame others for the mistake, but it was clearly Norris. So I guess form is temporary, class is permanent, and the form was sloppy from Norris. He'll hope to turn it around. I hope he turns it around. But the class was there. No ego from him. And I guess if I had to describe Lando Norris's race using a song title, I'd probably pick Wonderwall. I mean, we were wondering whether the strategy would be pulled off, whether he'd be able to rock up to the back of Piastri and overtake him. And I was also struck with awe and wonder at the brilliant move at the hairpin, and shortly what followed, the brilliant racecraft, but it ended in the wall, sadly.
Yeah, I did not expect to have an Oasis-related reference in this podcast, but that's well and truly appreciated. James, I guess this what Daniel said was pretty interesting. What's your perspective of things?
Well, I think ultimately, to start things off, Norris had made yet another scrappy Q3, which has become a running theme this season. He was so good in quali last year in those 8 pole positions, but this year in Q3 he just keeps messing up. He seemed quicker than Piastri all weekend up to that point. Then he messed up Q3, and that left him down in 7th on the grid, which was really not ideal, particularly given how hard passing is this team. So he was running a different strategy, and yet Piastri pretty much spent the whole race stuck behind Antonelli, and that has allowed Norris to catch. And ultimately, Norris was only on 2 lap fresher tyres, but with Piastri stuck behind Antonelli, he was able to have a go at the end. He pulled off a good move at first into the hairpin, but then, and the racing was all pretty good from that point until they got to turn 1, Piastri, and ultimately, but then Norris made a complete misjudgment there. He went into a gap which was always going to close and was never really existed in the first place, and ran into the back of his teammate, and he realised it immediately. He didn't even try to blame his teammate. He realised immediately that he was in the wrong. He was probably immediately asked, why did I go for that? That wasn't a gap. Why did I go? That was not a gaffe. I should not have gone for that. And kudos to him for owning up immediately and not trying to blame his teammate, admitting his error, which is good of him. But ultimately, it's another misjudgment from another error from Norris. Again, there are questions about his racecraft rules. Ultimately, in terms of in-team controversy, it's not the worst ever because it was Norris's mistake, and ultimately Norris paid the price for it, and Piastri was ultimately unaffected in terms of the race. So it was Norris's error, and Norris was the one who paid the penalty. So in terms of team tension, it wouldn't be too bad on that front. But yeah, it's a really not an error a driver like Norris should be making, though, running into the back of your teammates like that. So I think that's not a driver who wants to win the World Championship should be making. He just seems to bottle it under pressure. We saw that last year as well. And there have been some questions asked about his racecraft. It's not quite up there with Verstappen and Piastri's, and that was a pretty poor error in terms of racecraft.
Looking at the bigger picture now, in terms of the championship battle, is this something that we can look at as a pivotal moment? And do we think that anyone saying that the title challenge is over from his perspective is ill-advised and very naive to say? What's our perspective on? Has this changed the way that this championship looks, do you think? Starting with James here.
Well, it's only 12. Norris only lost 10 points at the end of the day for me. He was on for P5 beforehand, most likely. Might have got past. And Piastri only gained 12 points in the race. He's still only 22 points behind. All it takes is one DNF. And then that's 25 points. If Piastri retires from the next race and Norris wins, then all of a sudden Norris is back leading the championship again. And we got some questions about the reliability of the Mercedes engine. We've had a few Mercedes engine failures recently, and obviously McLaren won a Mercedes engine. Even if they don't break down, does that mean they're going to need some engine penalties later in the season after racing the back of the grid? So there's that question there. Still think that Norris is still possibly think on war pace. Norris is still a slightly quicker driver than Piastri as well. So if he could get his act together and actually nail some Q3s, we could see him bounce back. He's still only 22 points behind. You should not count him out. He's still ahead of Verstappen as well. He was a contender. You shouldn't count out Norris. He comfortably his teammate last year. So I still wouldn't rule him out of it. Even if at the moment the momentum does seem to be with Piastri, and Piastri's killing up the confidence at the moment, is in much better form. But and on the other hand, it could go the other way. I mean, Norris could have another incident. Norris could be the one who has a DNF, and then Piastri is all of a sudden like nearly 2 race wins ahead. And it's hard to see Norris coming back from that. But I wouldn't count Norris out yet, even though the momentum is very much with Piastri at the moment.
Yes, James, I was going to mention that pace that Norris had. I think it's really intriguing for the championship battle because it comes back to what we mentioned in Miami a few races ago, which is it was kind of a pace versus racecraft kind of perspective. Norris had the pace, but Piastri had the racecraft and was able to get past Verstappen easier and into the lead and run away with it. This time, Norris clearly again had the pace on Piastri, but Piastri was able to defend in that way. He was clever with the placement of his car, and he braked so late going into the last corner that Norris never stood a chance with hanging it out around the outside there. So I think it bodes really well for some more battles into the future. Maybe some spice as well between the McLaren drivers. This one was clearly Norris's fault, but maybe in the future we'll have more of a contentious debate, and it will probably properly ignite this championship battle, because so far it's been the worst championship battle of all time. They've never seen each other on track, really. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where it goes from here.
Yeah, Lucy, same type of question. Do you think that this has changed the face of this battle, or do you agree with James and Daniel here that still a long way to go? It's only 22 points. He's still only a retirement away, and all it takes for him, if there isn't a retirement, is a bit of good form.
Yeah, I think they weren't fighting for the win, so he's only lost 10 points to Piastri. And I think that as well, I mean, it's been said kind of by James and Daniel, so I won't just repeat what they've said, that, there's only a few points in it. And I think in general, when you're kind of around the halfway point of the season, if there is a race win or less gap between the drivers in the championship, then it's still on, because we are getting into the season where we start to see grid penalties and more mechanical DNFs and things like that. They'll become sort of a more present threat. So he's definitely not out of it, and he's still a very competitive driver. This is kind of by no means sort of basically him ruled out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll wait and see if he can bounce back, because I think we all want to see a championship battle, right? And I think he is ultimately the person who is going to be closest to Piastri, and I still have faith in him to have a bit of good form, because he has shown that before. So I think we shouldn't be so downbeat. I think that what you have said is absolutely right. So we'll see how it goes. Let's move on to our predictions now, and before we close out the show. So let's whiz through those quickly. I don't normally start the predictions, so I'm going to start this time. Mostly because I don't think any of us have done very well. But let's go through our poll and top 5 first. I said Norris pole. He finished 7th after having a horrible Q3, which is, like James mentioned, is becoming a little bit of a trend for him. So maybe that was ill-advised on my end. I then said a Piastri 1-2 ahead of Norris, putting Russell in 3rd, Verstappen in 4th, and Antonelli in 5th. Now, with all of those results in mind, I do not receive a single point, because none of them finished close to where they should be. Because Russell was supposed to be 1st, Verstappen 2nd, Antonelli 3rd, means that I don't get any points there. Piastri I put 1st instead of 4th, no points, and then Norris DNF'd. So nice and quick, 0 points from me there. Who wants to go next?
I can go next if you want.
Cool.
I actually got something right. Whoa.
You did indeed. That is so unlike you.
I know. What I'm actually doing this race is, if nobody's predictions have gone very well, is I'm just dragging you all down to my level. I said that Russell would be on pole, which he was. Fantastic. However, I do not have any faith in Mercedes race pace, so this is where this unravels a tad. I said Piastri P1, did not happen. I said Norris P2, also did not happen. I said Albon P3, which we're not going to talk about.
I think we should talk about.
No, we're not talking about that.
Not talking about that. Daniel, is this among the worst predictions we've ever had on the podcast?
Well, I don't really want to say that, because I put in P4, so that would kind of be admitting that my own predictions are
you're both
well.
up there, but I think having him in 3rd is worse than having him in 4th.
Oh yeah, it's definitely worse. Shame on you, Lucy.
Hey, Anwar, I've got is it? Do you get 2 points for pole position, or is it just 1?
3.
Yeah, I've already outscored my worst performance on here. So,
well, I think it's probably the single worst prediction we've had.
Yeah, it's not yet. Yeah, maybe I should. I think I need to stop predicting Williams to do well, and then they'll start doing well again. P4, I think I said Russell. I just scribbled it out in my notebook, so I may need you to check that. And then
P4.
Yeah, and then P5 Verstappen. So, bar the whole Williams thing, I got the right sort of vibe, just not anywhere near the right order.
We don't give points for vibes, unfortunately, Lucy. As much as I wish we could, there's nothing that says I can do that, so I won't. Daniel, but it's 3 points still better than whatever I got, because I'm on currently 0. Wait, I think we might have the first 0 pointer, actually, looking back at it. Daniel,
oh my God,
did you
it's not from me?
Yeah, I know. Daniel, why don't you reveal your predictions as well?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to boast, but I think I got a couple more than 3 this time. Pole position, George Russell. Maybe Lucy and I should have been down the casino when making this prediction instead of being on the podcast, because we were right miraculously. I also went for Piastri P1, Norris P2, which makes predictions very difficult from now on, because where did Mercedes come from? P3 Verstappen, which is 1 point, so that brings me up to 4. P4 Alex Albon, maybe, which is a shame. Obviously, he his difficulties. He was gone, you could say, by the end of the race. And P5, George Russell, I apologise, I was not familiar with your game.
I don't think any of us were. Thomas joined us for the podcast last week. So let me go through his top pole and top 5. He put Piastri on pole, did not happen. He also put Piastri ahead of Norris in a 1-2. That also did not happen. He put Verstappen in P3, that nets him a point. He also put Leclerc in P4, which also nets him a point, and put Russell in P5. So I don't think any of us were familiar with Russell's game in the race. So I guess that's something that's shared between all of us. I'm going to go through my DNF and random predictions because I think this is the first 0 point we've had on the pod. DNF, I put Pierre Gasly, did not do that. Alpine's were just slow. And the random prediction was 3 black and white flags. This was never mentioned on broadcast, but I don't think there was any issues with track limits, was there?
No, I don't. Not in the F1 race. No, there were quite a few in F1 Academy, but none in actual F1.
Try that again for Austria. I think you might have some better luck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, no, Anwar enforced a rule that said you can't make the same prediction twice.
When have I ever said that? Wait, no. That's never been said.
That's
Anwar, check the regulations.
I've got the list of deleted.
My bad. Let me go quickly check the constitution for our predictions, yeah? Oh, no, it's not there anyway.
For black and white flags, I've got the list of deleted times here.
Oh, thank you, James. Please save me from my 0 pointer.
Behrman has 3 deleted lap times, which means he might have got a black and white flag. I don't recall seeing one in the race, but maybe he did.
I think is it on the 4th one you get your black and white flag? Or
Then you get
a
a black and white flag on the 3rd and a 5-second penalty on the 4th.
Okay, got you. So because he would, so he would have been through the chicane in the last set of corners. So I remember him going wide quite a bit, but still, that's not enough for me because it would be at most 1 there. So that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. We have to move on. We can't have 2 0 pointers in a row, am I right? Lucy, why don't you go through your DNF and random prediction?
So I said that Lance Stroll was going to DNF, which did not happen. He just didn't do anything. And my random, I should have just taken my one from Spain where I said that the McLarens were going to collide, but I didn't. I said at least 1 World Drivers' Champion crashes into the Wall of Champions. Devastatingly, nobody did that. I think there may have been might have been where Piastri crashed in practice. I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah,
I mean, he might be a world. He had the championship lead in the Wall of Champions, just not a world champion.
At the end of the year, am I allowed to come back if he wins and retroactively claim some points for that?
Let me check the regulations of the Formula 1 predictions. No.
Okay, well then that's my 3 points for saying that George Russell was going to be on pole, which I think devastatingly makes it one of my more successful weekends.
Yeah, it is probably one of your more successful weekends in truth. Daniel, how about you? What was your DNF and random predictions?
Okay, DNF was Tsunoda, which didn't happen, but random prediction, I'm definitely taking points for this. There will be at least 2 overtakes between McLaren drivers during the race for the first time, and the first one was from Norris on Piastri at the hairpin, and the second one was from Piastri on Norris at the last chicane just before they crashed. How about that point?
Right, Lucy, what are you thinking with this? Because I was on the fence. I can get behind it.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you.
I'll get behind it, but that's pretty well done actually.
I'll allow it, not least because I can tell that you're just a little bit annoyed about it, Anwar. So I'll allow it.
Okay, right. So we're now doing out of spite. Cheers, guys.
As good a reason as any. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Let's go through Thomas's predictions and then we just round out the show. He put Tsunoda as well as a DNF and put Max as a race ban. Now that could have happened if Russell got his way because he did try and be cheeky. By braking to try and allow him through, which unfortunately did not get him yield the result that he expected. So unfortunately nothing there. So he got 2 points there. But that brings us to the end of our Canadian Grand Prix review. I want to thank all of our guests for coming on, James, Lucy, Daniel, and I want to thank you guys for listening or watching from your seats at home. we'll see you at some point over the next couple of weeks, potentially to do a review of the Formula One movie. And then that'll become before our preview for the Austrian Grand Prix. So I hope we see or hear from you then. Thank you guys very much for listening, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye.